First contact with the Viridians. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of the ESS Horizon, watching the strange crystalline vessel approach. After decades of searching the stars for intelligent life, humanity's first contact was about to begin. The alien ship's surface rippled with colors that shouldn't exist in nature, its geometric patterns both beautiful and unsettling. Analysis complete, Captain. Lieutenant Rodriguez reported from his station. The vessel's hull appears to be composed of some kind of living crystal. Energy readings are off the charts, but they're contained. Whatever their tech is, it's far beyond ours. Sarah nodded, maintaining her composure despite her racing heart. Humanity had prepared for this moment, but all their first contact protocols suddenly felt inadequate. Open a channel using the universal greeting we developed. Let's hope our mathematicians were right about basic concepts being universal. The bridge crew held their breath as the signal was transmitted. Seconds stretched into minutes. Just as Sarah was about to order a second transmission, the alien vessel responded. Patterns of light danced across its surface, and their computers began processing incoming data. They're responding, Rodriguez exclaimed. The universal translation matrix is adapting. It's working. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a being that seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as their ship. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but with faceted surfaces that shifted and changed as it moved. When it spoke, its words were translated with surprising clarity. "We are the Viridians," the being announced. "We have watched your species for some time, waiting for you to reach beyond your cradle. We come in peace, though we bring warning." Sarah stepped forward. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Spaceship Horizon. We welcome you and offer friendship. What warning do you bring?" The Viridian's surface rippled with dark colors. "Your species has great potential, but also great danger. We have seen the path you walk. There are those among us who believe you should be contained." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "Contained. We have no hostile intentions toward your people. Intent is not the concern. Your species adapts too quickly, thinks too differently. Some fear what you might become." The Viridian paused, its crystalline form pulsing with light. "I am Ambassador Zenith. I was chosen to make first contact because I believe in your potential, but you must prove them wrong." Before Sarah could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. "Captain," her tactical officer shouted. 3 more Viridian vessels just dropped out of FTL. They're charging weapons." Sarah's mind raced. This wasn't just first contact. It was a test. "Ambassador Zenith, please, whatever concerns your people have, let us address them through dialogue. We've barely begun to know each other." Zenith's form flickered. "These are the containment faction. They do not seek dialogue. How you handle this moment will determine humanity's fate." The tactical display showed the 3 hostile ships moving to surround them. The horizon was advanced by Earth standards, but against alien technology, they stood little chance in direct combat. Sarah had seconds to make a decision that could affect all of humanity. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, broadcast all our cultural and historical records on an open channel," she ordered. "Everything. Our art, our music, our stories, even our failures and how we learned from them." "Captain," Rodriguez questioned, even as his fingers flew across his console. "If they fear what we might become, let's show them who we are," Sarah explained. "Ambassador Zenith, you said you believe in our potential. Help us show your people that humanity's adaptability, our diversity of thought, these aren't weaknesses to be feared. They're strengths that could benefit both our species." The bridge fell silent as the data streamed out into space. The hostile ships continued their approach, weapons hot. Then, slowly, patterns of light began to ripple across their hulls, matching the rhythm of Earth's transmitted music. "Fascinating." Zenith's voice carried a new tone. "You choose to defend yourselves with culture rather than weapons. Perhaps I was right about your species after all." The hostile ships halted their approach. their weapons powered down as new transmissions filled the air, Viridian art and culture flowing back in exchange. First contact had become first understanding, and humanity had passed its first test among the stars. Sarah allowed herself to breathe again, knowing this was just the beginning. The real challenge would be maintaining peace between species so fundamentally different. But if they could turn this moment of potential conflict into one of cultural exchange, anything was possible. Ambassador Zenith, she said, I believe we have much to learn from each other. The crystalline being's surface shimmered with what Sarah hoped was agreement. Indeed, Captain Chen. Indeed we do. The diplomatic dance. 2 weeks after first contact, the halls of the hastily constructed Earth Viridian Cultural Exchange Center hummed with activity. Captain Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's interim diplomatic liaison, watched in fascination as human scientists and artists mingled with Viridian delegates. The crystalline beings cast rainbow refractions across the walls as they moved, their surfaces constantly shifting in response to their emotions. Ambassador Zenith approached her, today's form incorporating subtle patterns that Sarah had learned indicated curiosity. Your species continues to surprise us, Captain Chen. The speed with which you constructed this facility, adapted to our environmental needs, and began learning our color language is unprecedented. We've had lots of practice adapting quickly, Sarah replied, remembering the crisis that had sparked humanity's rapid advancement into space. Though I must admit, your language of light and color poses unique challenges. Dr. Harrison's team is still working on a more sophisticated translation matrix. As if summoned by her words, Dr. Maya Harrison hurried over, her dark eyes bright with excitement. Captain, Ambassador, you need to see this. She held up a tablet displaying complex wavelength patterns. We've discovered something fascinating about the Viridian color language. It's not just communication. It's mathematics. Zenith's surface rippled with what Sarah now recognized as approval. You begin to understand. Our language is our science, our art, our very way of perceiving reality. This is why some among us fear your species. You think in ways we cannot predict. Before Sarah could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Security Chief Torres's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, we have a situation. Someone's attempting to access the restricted cultural database, both ours and the Viridians. The source appears to be inside the facility. Sarah exchanged glances with Zenith, whose surface had darkened to deep indigo. Concern. The containment faction, she asked quietly. Perhaps, Zenith replied, or perhaps something worse. There are those who would prefer our species never learn to understand each other. Dr. Harrison was already working on her tablet. The access patterns are strange. It's like they're not just copying data. They're correlating it, looking for something specific. Sarah felt a chill. What exactly are they comparing? Historical records mainly. Earth's major conflicts, technological breakthroughs, artistic movements, being cross-referenced with similar periods in Viridian history. Harrison's eyes widened. Wait, these algorithms, they're searching for patterns, predictive patterns. Someone's trying to calculate humanity's future development, Sarah realized. But why? Zenith's surface swirled with complex patterns. Because, Captain, knowledge is power. If one could predict how your species will develop, one could control that development, or stop it entirely. Sarah's diplomatic training warred with her military instincts. This was supposed to be a cultural exchange, but it was starting to feel like a battlefield. Dr. Harrison, can you trace the source? Working on it. The signal's bouncing through multiple systems, but there's something odd about the encryption. It's a hybrid, part human, part Viridian. Impossible, Zenith stated, colors flashing rapidly. Our systems are incompatible with yours. Unless, Sarah said slowly, someone's already figured out how to bridge that gap. Someone who's had access to both. Security teams were already moving through the facility, but Sarah knew this wasn't a problem they could solve with force. This was exactly the kind of situation that had made some Viridians fear humanity. Their ability to adapt and integrate alien concepts at an alarming rate. But maybe that was also the solution. Dr. Harrison, instead of trying to block the access, can you insert our own pattern into their search algorithm? Something that shows cooperation between our species rather than conflict. Harrison's fingers flew across her tablet. Like what? Sarah looked at the humans and Viridians working together around them, at the art they'd created together, at the new forms of expression that had emerged from their collaboration. Show them this. Show them what we're building here. Not what we might become separately, but what we can become together. The scientist nodded and began working with renewed purpose. Zenith moved closer, its crystalline surface beginning to glow with subtle patterns that matched the rhythms of Harrison's typing, a Viridian offering assistance in their own way. For several tense minutes they waited. Then Harrison smiled. They're responding to the new data. The intrusion patterns are changing. They're not just watching anymore. They're engaging with the cooperative scenarios we're feeding them. Because that's humanity's true strength, Sarah said, watching the alarm lights fade. Not just our ability to adapt, but our desire to connect, to understand, to grow together rather than apart. Zenith's surface blazed with colors Sarah had never seen before. Perhaps this is what my people have failed to understand about yours, Captain. We feared your unpredictability, but we should have recognized your capacity for harmony. Sarah nodded, but her relief was tempered with caution. They'd won this round, but someone out there was playing a longer game. The question was, were they trying to prevent an alliance between humans and Viridians, or testing to see what such an alliance might become? As security teams reported the all clear and the facility returned to normal operations, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this diplomatic dance was about to become far more complex and far more dangerous. Alliance forged in fire. The warning came not in words or colors, but in silence. The quantum communication network connecting Earth to the Viridian homeworld went dark without warning. Captain Sarah Chen was in the middle of a diplomatic briefing when every screen in the Cultural Exchange Center turned black. Status report. She barked, military training taking over as her diplomatic veneer dropped away. Dr. Harrison's fingers danced across multiple interfaces. It's not just our link to the Viridian homeworld. All interstellar communications are being blocked. Something's creating quantum interference on a massive scale. Ambassador Zenith's crystalline form had turned a deep, stormy gray, a color Sarah had never seen them display before. This should not be possible. Our quantum network cannot be blocked unless... They stopped, surface rippling with distress. Unless what? Sarah pressed. Unless someone has weaponized our own technology against us. Zenith's form shimmered. The containment faction threatened this, but we did not believe they would dare. Security Chief Torres burst into the room. Captain, we're picking up multiple anomalies in nearby space. Energy signatures unlike anything we've seen before. The facility's main display flickered to life, showing tactical readings. Dozens of tiers were appearing in space around Earth, and according to the last readings they'd received, around the Viridian homeworld as well. But these weren't normal ships dropping out of FTL. These were something else entirely. They're quantum storms, Zenith explained, their voice carrying harmonics of fear. Artificial disruptions in space-time. The containment faction has found a way to weaponize the very principles that allow our civilizations to communicate and travel between stars. Sarah watched as the storms grew larger, their edges crackling with impossible energies. What's their goal? Isolation, Zenith replied. They mean to cut our worlds off from each other, to prevent further cultural contamination. But they do not understand the consequences. These storms, they are unstable. They will grow until they consume everything. Dr. Harrison looked up from her readings, face pale. They're already affecting Earth's magnetic field. If they continue to grow at this rate, they'll start causing devastating effects within hours. Sarah felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. This was survival. How do we stop them? The storms operate on quantum principles, Zenith explained. They can be neutralized, but it would require technology that combines both our sciences. Technology that does not yet exist. Then we'll create it, Sarah declared. Dr. Harrison, gather every physicist and engineer in the facility. Ambassador Zenith, we need your people's expertise. We have hours to do what would normally take years. What followed was a blur of activity as humans and Viridians worked together with desperate intensity. The Viridians' understanding of quantum mechanics merged with humanity's talent for improvisation and unconventional thinking. Dr. Harrison's team worked to translate Viridian mathematical concepts into practical engineering solutions, while Zenith's people adapted their crystalline technology to interface with human systems. The storms are reaching critical mass, Torres reported grimly. We're seeing earthquakes, auroras visible at the equator. The Viridian homeworld must be experiencing similar effects. Sarah watched as Harrison and Zenith huddled over a hastily constructed device that combined Viridian crystals with human electronics. Will it work? In theory, Harrison replied without looking up. The device should generate a counter-resonance that will collapse the quantum storms, but we'll need to get it into space, into the heart of the largest storm. The ESS Horizon is still in orbit, Sarah said. But in this interference, we can't transport the device or send commands remotely. Someone will have to take it up manually. I will go, Zenith declared, their surface pulsing with determination. My crystalline form can withstand the quantum disruption better than human biology. You don't know how to pilot our ships, Sarah countered. I'll go, but I'll need you to interface with the device. We do this together. As they raced to the launch pad, alarms blared throughout the facility. The storms were growing faster now, their edges beginning to tear at the fabric of reality itself. The sky above had turned into a twisted canvas of impossible colors as quantum effects began manifesting on a macro scale. The Horizon's launch sequence was abbreviated, safety protocols bypassed as they shot into the roiling chaos above. Sarah piloted manually, fighting against forces that shouldn't exist in normal space, while Zenith interfaced with their jury-rigged device. We must reach the nexus point, Zenith called out, their crystalline form glowing brighter as they channeled energy into the device. Where the storms converge. Sarah pushed the ship harder, flying through reality-bending distortions that made her question everything she knew about physics. The Horizon's hull creaked under forces it was never designed to withstand. Now, Harrison's voice crackled over the failing comm system. You have to activate it now. Zenith's form blazed like a star as they poured their own energy into the device. Sarah felt reality twist around them as human and Viridian technology worked in harmony for the first time, creating something entirely new. The quantum storms seemed to pause, their chaotic energies drawn toward the ship like water down a drain. For one terrible moment, everything stopped. Then the storms imploded, collapsing in on themselves in a cascade of failing quantum effects. The sky cleared, revealing normal space once more. As emergency systems brought the Horizon systems back online, Sarah looked at Zenith. The ambassador's crystalline form had been altered by their ordeal, now displaying patterns that seemed to bridge the gap between human and Viridian aesthetics. We did it, Sarah breathed. Yes, Zenith agreed, their voice carrying new harmonics. But more importantly, we have proved something my people thought impossible, that our differences need not divide us. They can make us stronger. As they began their descent back to Earth, quantum communications began to restore themselves. The first message through was from the Viridian homeworld, carrying news that would change everything. The containment factions' attempt to isolate their species had failed, but in doing so, they have forced an evolution in both civilizations that could never be undone. Humanity and the Viridians were now bound together, not by treaties or fear, but by the simple truth that they were stronger together than apart. Their alliance had been forged in fire, tested by chaos, and emerged transformed. Operation Starbridge. 1 month after the quantum storm crisis, the combined human Viridian research facility, nicknamed Starbridge, hung in Earth orbit like a metallic snowflake. Its hybrid design reflected both species' aesthetics. Human pragmatism merged with Viridian crystalline beauty. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the central observatory, watching Earth rotate below while consulting with her new Joint Command staff. The integration of our technologies is proceeding faster than anyone anticipated, Dr. Harrison reported, gesturing to holographic displays that showed the facility's progress. The Viridian crystalline matrices are adapting to our computer systems in ways we never imagined possible, perhaps because they were always meant to. Ambassador Zenith observed. Their form had permanently changed since the crisis, incorporating patterns that seemed to bridge both species' visual languages. Our technologies, like our people's, appear to have complementary aspects we never recognized before. Security Chief Torres frowned at her tactical displays. But we're not the only ones who've noticed. We're picking up increased activity at the edge of the solar system. Ships that don't match any known configuration. Sarah studied the readings. The unknown vessels were staying just at the edge of their detection range, watching. The containment faction. No, Zenith's surface rippled with concern. These are something else. There are other species who have long feared the possibility of our civilizations joining forces. The quantum storm crisis proved their fears were justified. Together, we overcame what should have been impossible. So now we have more potential enemies, Sarah sighed. Just what we needed. Dr. Harrison looked up from her work, eyes bright with excitement despite the tension. But we also have something they don't. The prototype. All eyes turned to the sealed chamber adjacent to the observatory. Inside, suspended in a field of crystalline energy, floated what looked like a hybrid between a human neural interface and a Viridian consciousness crystal. It was the first true merger of their technologies, designed to allow direct communication between human and Viridian minds. The bridge between our species, Zenith said softly. If it works, it will change everything. Which is exactly why we're being watched, Sarah noted. The question is, do we proceed with the test knowing we might be attacked, or do we wait? We cannot wait. Zenith's surface pulsed with urgency. Each day we delay gives our opponents more time to prepare. And there is another factor. The prototype is becoming unstable. The merger of our technologies requires completion. It must be tested soon, or we risk losing everything we've gained. Sarah looked around the room at her mixed human and Viridian staff. In just a month, they'd learned to work together so seamlessly it was sometimes hard to remember they were different species. Who are the test subjects? I will represent my people, Zenith said immediately. The changes I underwent during the crisis make me uniquely suited to interfacing with the prototype. And I'll do it for humanity, Sarah heard herself say, surprising everyone including herself. I've worked more closely with the Viridians than anyone else. It has to be me. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Medical staff from both species monitored their vital signs, while engineers made final adjustments to the prototype. The unknown ships continued their distant vigil, a constant reminder of what was at stake. As Sarah and Zenith took their positions on either side of the prototype, Dr. Harrison's voice came over the comm. Remember, this is just a test. A few minutes of connection to prove the concept. At the first sign of trouble, we pull you out. Sarah met Zenith's gaze across the chamber. The ambassador's crystalline form pulsed with a pattern she somehow recognized as reassurance. They reached for the prototype together. The moment of connection was like nothing Sarah had ever experienced. Her consciousness expanded, merging with Zenith's in a space that was neither human nor Viridian, but something entirely new. She saw the universe through crystalline senses, felt the quantum relationships between all things. And Zenith experienced human intuition, the ability to make creative leaps beyond pure logic. Through their merged perception, they suddenly understood why their species had developed so differently yet remained compatible. They were like two halves of the same evolutionary path, separated eons ago, but always meant to reconnect. The prototype's energy field pulsed, stronger than expected. Alarms blared in the physical world, but in their merged consciousness, Sarah and Zenith made a discovery that changed everything. The unknown ships weren't just watching them. They were scanning the prototype, trying to understand and replicate it. But in doing so, they revealed something about themselves. Through their merged senses, Sarah and Zenith could see the truth. These weren't simply alien vessels. They were probes from multiple species, all drawn by the same fear and fascination. We're not just building a bridge between our species, Sarah realized, her thoughts merging with Zenith's. We're creating a template for something larger, a path for all species to follow. Zenith agreed, their merged consciousness expanding. But only if they choose to trust rather than fear. The prototype's energy field surged again, and this time they didn't fight it. Instead, they directed it outward, sending a pulse of combined human Viridian consciousness toward the watching vessels. Not an attack, but an invitation, a glimpse of what was possible when different species chose to work together. The effect was immediate. The unknown ships broke their formation, some retreating, others moving closer. But all of them had received the message. Humanity and the Viridians had found a way to transcend their differences, and they were offering to share what they'd learned. When Sarah and Zenith were finally separated, both forever changed by their experience, they knew Operation Starbridge had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. They hadn't just proved that their species could work together. They'd shown that the very differences their enemies feared could become their greatest strength. As the facility's staff celebrated their success, Sarah watched new ships appearing at the edge of their sensors, vessels from species they'd never encountered before, coming not to threaten, but to learn. The bridge they'd built between their species was becoming exactly what they'd named it, a star bridge, reaching out across the galaxy, offering new paths to understanding. Legacy of Two Worlds. 5 years after the success of Operation Starbridge, the Sol-Viridian Alliance had become a beacon of interstellar cooperation. The original research facility had grown into a vast network of hybrid stations, each one a testament to what different species could achieve together. Captain Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen, stood in the grand chamber of the newly completed Convergence Hub, preparing to address representatives from 20 different species. Her old friend Ambassador Zenith stood beside her, their crystalline form now permanently altered to display both human and Viridian patterns. The changes weren't just cosmetic. Years of working with the consciousness bridge had transformed them both in fundamental ways. Sarah could sense quantum relationships the way Viridians did, while Zenith had developed an intuitive understanding of human emotions. Hard to believe this all started with a first contact that almost went wrong. Sarah mused, watching the delegates file in. Some were humanoid, others crystalline like the Viridians, and some defied easy classification altogether. The best partnerships often begin with misunderstanding, Zenith replied, their surface rippling with what Sarah recognized as amusement. It forces us to look past our assumptions. The chamber quieted as Sarah stepped up to the podium. The consciousness bridge technology had evolved, allowing her thoughts to be simultaneously translated into each species' preferred form of communication. Words, colors, harmonics, even quantum patterns. 5 years ago, our civilization stood at a crossroads, she began. The containment faction believed that difference meant danger, that isolation was the only safe path forward. They nearly destroyed both our worlds trying to keep us apart. Instead, they'd brought us together in ways none of us could have imagined. The assembled delegates stirred, many of them remembering the quantum storms that had threatened to tear reality apart. Those events had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, drawing attention from species that had previously kept their distance. But the real breakthrough wasn't the technology we developed to survive. Sarah continued. It was the discovery that our differences weren't obstacles to be overcome. They were the very things that made our alliance strong. Human creativity combined with Viridian precision. Earth's chaos harmonizing with Viridian order. Dr. Harrison, now director of Xenotechnology Research, activated a holographic display showing the progress they'd made. Hybrid chips that combine human intuitive control systems with Viridian quantum drives. Medical breakthroughs that merge Earth's biological understanding with Viridian crystal healing. New forms of art that could only exist through the collaboration of both species. Today, we're not just celebrating what humans and Viridians have achieved together, Sarah announced. We're opening the doors to all species who wish to join us. The consciousness bridge technology has been adapted to work with multiple forms of sentience. The Convergence Hub will serve as a neutral ground where any civilization can come to learn, to share, and to grow. Security Chief Torres, monitoring from her station, sent Sarah a private alert. The long-range sensors had detected unusual activity at the edge of the system. But unlike the fearful observations of 5 years ago, these readings showed ships of various species arriving to witness the historic moment. We face challenges ahead, Sarah acknowledged. There are still those who fear change, who see cooperation as a threat to their power. The containment faction may be gone, but their ideas persist. Just last month, we detected attempts to sabotage the hub's quantum communications array. Zenith stepped forward, their crystalline form glowing with powerful harmonics. But we are stronger now. What our enemies fail to understand is that each attempt to divide us only brings us closer together. Each challenge forces us to innovate in ways we never would have considered alone. The chamber's crystal glass windows suddenly darkened as something massive passed overhead. The pride of their joint fleet, the Explorer-class vessel Unity. Its hull seamlessly merged human and Viridian design philosophies, creating something entirely new. The ship was crewed by members of both species, their minds linked through next-generation consciousness bridges, operating as one. Look around this chamber, Sarah urged. Every species here has something unique to offer. Different ways of thinking, of solving problems, of seeing the universe. Imagine what we could achieve if we all worked together, not despite our differences, but because of them. The Unity's shadow passed, revealing Earth hanging in space beside them. From this distance, you could see the changes wrought by 5 years of human-Viridian cooperation. Crystalline structures caught the sunlight, part of a planetary defense network that doubled as an atmospheric purification system. Ships of various species moved through careful traffic patterns, carrying trade goods and cultural exchanges between worlds. This is the legacy we're building, Sarah concluded, not just for our 2 worlds, but for all worlds, a future where diversity is our greatest strength, where understanding bridges the gaps between stars. As she finished speaking, something unprecedented occurred. The delegates, moving as one, activated their own consciousness bridges, the chamber filled with a harmony of thought and emotion that transcended species, not erasing their differences, but celebrating them. In that moment, Sarah felt the truth of what they'd achieved. They hadn't just built a bridge between 2 species, they'd created a foundation for a whole new kind of civilization. Later, as the delegates mingled and formed new connections, Sarah and Zenith stood in the hub's observatory, watching ships of all shapes and sizes moving through space around them. What do you think the containment faction would say if they could see this? Sarah wondered. Zenith's surface rippled with complex patterns that merged humor and wisdom. They feared we would change each other. On that count, at least, they were right. They just never understood that change was nothing to fear. Sarah nodded, feeling the quantum rhythms of space through her enhanced senses, while Zenith processed the human emotions flowing through the hub. They had changed each other, and they would keep changing. That was the point. The legacy of their 2 worlds wasn't just in the technology they'd created or the threats they'd overcome. It was in proving that the greatest adventures begin when different species choose to face the unknown together. The Unity passed overhead again, its hybrid crew preparing for their first long-range exploration mission. They would carry the message of the Sol Viridian Alliance to the stars, that the future belongs not to those who fear difference, but to those who embrace it.